Our speaker today is Jennifer McConnell, a resident of Sheldon, lived in Franklin County for the past 20 years. She's a graduate of Moody Bible Institute in Chicago with a degree in church music and a graduate of Castleton University with a master's in music education. She teaches K-6 general music, chorus, and band in Franklin, Vermont, and was named as UVM Outstanding Teacher for her school district this year. Her husband, as you know, is minister in Franklin, and Jennifer serves as the worship leader for both churches in their parish, East Franklin Union and Franklin United. Anne Steele, the subject of her presentation this morning, is a personal hero of hers, and we'll hear a little bit about that. Please welcome Jennifer McConnell to St. Albans.
All right. Well, good morning. I'll try using it. Is this helpful at all, or is it helpful? Okay. All right. I'll try to manage all of this. So, well, good morning. It's great to be here. This is a bit outside of my comfort zone. I'm really used to talking to kids all the time. So if I start talking to you like kids, I apologize. But I do want to tell you, my friend Bryant Reynolds approached me last summer at the ice cream social in Franklin and said, "Hey, I'm part of this program called OLLI, and would you come speak to us?" And I was like, "Sure." And I had no idea what to talk about. And anyway, after talking with John, I thought, oh, not many people know about Anne Steele, and I really do love her. And I've done some interesting things with her music, or with her hymns over the years, so I thought I'd just share about her. She's a life definitely worth sharing about and learning about, and then tell you about what I'm doing with her hymns. So she did have a very tragic life that we'll kind of explore a little bit. And I'm going to try to stay paced here to finish at noon. I know you guys have lunch to get to. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to join you because 4th grade will be waiting for me. But we'll try to finish in an hour. I'm going to try to do my best to keep it to that. So a little about me. I am a music teacher up in Franklin, and I've been teaching in Franklin for 20 years. I've taught in it was 3 days a week for a long time, and I've taught in a couple of other schools, but now I'm just in Franklin, and living my best life there. I'm also a church musician. As John said, I studied church music in college, and so that's kind of my love and my passion, and I just love leading congregation and worship every week, and all that comes with that. And then finally, I am a hymn nerd. I grew up, my father was a physician. Some of you might know him, Max Baird. He practiced here in St. Albans for quite a few years. Yeah, I see some, yeah, I know, we miss him too, yeah. He's back in Tennessee now, but I grew up in Tennessee, and my family was here for a few years, and now they're back. But anyway, my dad loved hymns, and he would just talk about them all the time, and kind of these rich theological ideas that would come from Hymnody. And so as a young kid and as a teenager, I just fell in love with hymns, and all through college and beyond. And a lot of churches do a lot of like more modern, worship, and we do that in our church too. But I think there's a lot about hymns that is really special, and kind of ties us to our ancestry in when we're talking about the faith. And even outside of that, just culturally, a lot of the hymns are big. So I love hymns, and I love hymn writers, and so that's kind of where this passion for Anne Steele came, and we'll hear a little bit more about it. So Anne Steele was born in England in a tiny little village called Broughton, and she was the daughter of William Steele, who was a timber merchant and a lay preacher. So he preached a little bit in their particular Baptist church, which particular Baptists were basically like the Puritans. So they were not part of the Church of England, and they were the Puritans of their day, and in that region. in England. So her father was a timber merchant and preached in their little church there sometimes. His uncle was the pastor for, I think, 60 years or something in that tiny little church. I'll show you a picture of it in a few minutes. Anne's mother was Anne Froude. I'm not positive I'm saying her last name correctly, but she also, the names are repeated, so if you get confused at any point about who's who, just feel free to interject or yell, that's fine. So Anne's father, William, was also a poet, and just kind of naturally gifted for it. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of a poem that he wrote to his wife, Anne, when he was trying to get her to marry him. So he says, "Ingenious and beloved friend, who fills my heart with grief, the noble temper of your mind doth yield me great relief. Else how should I my trouble bear, as being quite forlorn? In what dark shades must I reside, if all my hopes were gone? My dearest love, let love attract and draw me to your love, and with affection let's unite, like as the turtle doves. I'm bound to you with bonds of love that will last to the grave. Pray therefore, let me have your love. It's only this I crave." And it goes on, and he's begging her to please marry him in a very clever way. So anyway, Anne came by it easily, having grown up in that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, just kind of her influences in poetry and hymn writing. So William and Anne were married sometime in late 1713 to early 1714. And then they had 3 children. William IV, I realize that is very tiny, so I'll tell you what it says. William IV, so Anne's brother William, born in 1715, Anne, born in 1717, and then her brother Thomas, born in 1720, but he died within about a month of his birth. And actually, their mother, so Anne's brother Thomas died, but their mother died suddenly at the age of 36 after giving birth to Thomas. And so she died in May that year, and then Thomas was buried July 1st. So I don't know exactly what that was, but I can only imagine that he wasn't, he didn't have his mother, so he couldn't survive. So Anne was 3 years old when her mother died. So this is their family home in Broughton, England. And after their mother died, William, younger William, and Anne were cared for by their father's sister, Mary, who, and they had grown up in this home. The name of their home is Grandfather's. And they had grown up there, and so Mary just stayed and helped to care for Anne and William, which was great because their father, William, being a timber merchant, was on the road a lot, and he wouldn't have been able to carry on his business and also care for both of the young children. And you can see there that Grandfather's is kind of surrounded by trees and hills, and this is reflected a lot in Anne's poems and hymns later on, that nature is such an important thing to her. And she grew up, it says, with her brother William just running around the property all the time until later she got sick. We had the good fortune in our family in 2017 to be able to, my husband, as John said, is the pastor in Franklin, and we were able to have a sabbatical. And we got a grant, and we were able to take our whole family, all 4 kids and us, and go to Europe. And we went to Germany. This is the 500th celebration of the Reformation there. And then we went to England and got to see the homes of a couple of our heroes. And we got to go to Broughton. So here's me standing in front of Grandfather's. It was a wonderful, fun day for me to be able, for us, my husband loves Anne Steele too, but driving around in this ridiculously large van, because they don't have minivans there, so on the wrong side of the road on very narrow streets, but we finally found it and landed at Grandfather's, so it was great to be able to experience a little bit of Anne Steele. So when Anne was about 6 years old, William married another Anne, the third Anne. His first wife, his daughter, and then his second wife was Anne Cater. And and actually a lot of the information that there is about Anne Steele came from her stepmother, who kept just really specific and detailed diaries of their whole family's lives. So yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. 1724, Anne's half-sister Molly, also named Mary, was born. By the time, well, she started going to boarding school in Trowbridge, which is, well, I looked on Google Maps, and it's like 46 miles from Broughton to there. So imagine what that would have been back in the 1700s to get there. So she did stay at a boarding school in Trowbridge, and it was kind of in a marsh area. So in November 1730, Anne contracted measles and was home for a little while, and then the following January she got ill again. And so Mrs. Steele, being her stepmother, always referred to it as the egg, and Anne was sick a lot, and she had just continuing, once she got to be this age of just being ill all the time. She would have to take breaks from school and come home, and anyway, in retrospect, they assumed at this point that she had tertian malaria, which was marsh fever, which made sense being in the school in Trowbridge that was in a marshland. So this would cause her illness and suffering for the rest of her life, including symptoms like anemia, weakness, and proneness to other infections. That'll come up again a little bit later. Any questions at this point? I don't want to just stand here and, no? Okay, great. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm just kidding, if you have a question. When Anne got older, she did have, she was writing poems and some hymns at that point that were unpublished. She didn't want them to be published. She just shared them with her church and her family and friends. But there were quite a few men that thought that she was a wonderful woman, because she was. And one of them was James Elcombe, and he was a suitor of hers. For a long time, people said, historians of Anne Steele said that that they were engaged, and that the day before their wedding, that he drowned in the river. And that was probably actually not true. He did drown in a river, in the Avon River. He was definitely a friend of hers and a suitor, and there's question as to whether or not they were engaged, but they could have been. Later in my presentation, when I'll show you one of the hymns that was written that they think is attributed to her writing after his death. So when you see Isaac Watts, is anyone familiar with that name? Yeah, okay, a few. So Isaac Watts was a prominent hymn writer and pastor in London, and he was a few years older. You can see, well, you can't see probably from there. He was born in 1674 and died in 1749. So he was a few years older than Anne, or quite a few. But he was very influential in her hymn writing. So in her tiny little church in Broughton, they had a publication of one of his hymnals, and so she was used to singing his hymns, and he was kind of the first one to in the English church anyway, to take like kind of ideas from scripture and turn them into congregational singing. So they would only sing psalms mostly before that, and it was a little bit of a controversy whether or not that would be okay. But Isaac Watts was a little bit of he just forged ahead, a little progressive. So Isaac Watts wrote around 750 hymns in his life, which is incredible. When we were in England a few years ago, we took a tour, just like a private tour with this lady who was walking us through kind of the church history in London. And she told us that Isaac Watts actually went to a special school for children who were writing poetry. So like they did everything in poet, like as poets. And so everything they were writing, it was just like how they communicated, which I think is astounding. Like writing lyrics is like the most scary thing to me. I'm terrible at it, and I love writing music, but he was just a master of poetry and prose. So he wrote hymns that you might be familiar with, like Joy to the World. Everybody knows that. That's Isaac Watts. One called When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, I Sing the Mighty Power of God, O God, our help in ages past. And one of my favorites, based on Psalm 23, called My Shepherd Will Supply My Need. It is beautiful. And if you would like a link to it, I can give you one. It's a gorgeous song. I learned it when I was in college, had it sung at my wedding. It will be sung at my funeral. So anyway, I just had to throw that in there. It's one of my favorites. Not that I'm planning on that yet, but you never know. So as I said, she grew up in the Old Baptist Church and had Isaac Watts psalms and hymns that were used in their worship service. So this was very influential to Anne. And so a lot of her like vocabulary that she uses in her hymns are very similar to ideas that Isaac Watts had in his. And so she definitely had her own style, and you'll see how even a lot of her kind of phrases are reused through her hymns. I'm not going to show you a ton, just a few. But anyway, being a naturally gifted poet, Anne wrote just a lot of poems and hymns throughout her life. So I have to tell you that I'm not 100% sure about why I took this picture, but I'll tell you why. So on the left is the Old Baptist Chapel in Broughton that Anne grew up going to and where they would sing these songs. On the right is the Baptist Church, also in Broughton, and I just can't remember for sure if the Old Baptist Chapel burned down and then they built the church right next to it, but either way there was a connection. And when we were in Broughton, we were walking in front of the church on the right, and there was this older man going in and out of the door, and he saw us looking at the house, and he's like, "Are you here because you love Anne Steele?" And we were like, "Yes, we are." And so he invited us in. It's a home now, just a private residence, and this man and his wife lived there. They might have sold it since then, I'm not sure. But he invited us in and showed us around and the renovations that they've made, and it was just kind of magical to be in this place that used to be a church that was special to us. So the end of Anne's life, she continued, I'm obviously jumping way ahead here, but she continued to be sick for many years. In addition to malaria, she had colic, and that was either due to irritable bowel syndrome or kind of a chronic ulcer. And because of that, she had constant infections and anemia, and she had, toward the end of her life, a tooth abscess that ultimately ruptured and kind of was the beginning of the end for her. And she died when she was 62. And I pointed out because in her hymnody, she does talk a lot about nature, and she talks about the goodness of God, but she talks a ton about sorrowing and suffering and what that is like to go through, and still to give praise to God in the middle of that. So suffering was, from the time she was 3 years old and her mother and brother died, all the way through. There also is a story that she was thrown from a horse when she was 19, and that she was an invalid for the rest of her life. That's not true either. Her father fell from a horse and was injured, but he recovered, and she might have fallen from a horse. I didn't read about that, but she was not an invalid for the rest of her life until 9 years before her death. Her father died, and then she started. She was a little less able to get around after that, and for the last couple of years, she was an invalid, but it wasn't because of a horse accident that I know of. to go back, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I missed something. So the publication of her hymns, as I said, she didn't really want her hymns to be published, but in 1760, quite a few years before her death, she was convinced, and I was scouring last night through the biography that I have, and I was thinking that I had read somewhere that her stepmother had really urged her to have her hymns published, and I couldn't find that for sure, so I can't say for sure that that's what happened, but I think it sounds pretty plausible that her stepmother would have. And she was writing hymns in this period of, like, there were so many hymn writers during that time. There was Charles Wesley, Isaac Watts, as I said before her. What's that? Oh, I thought you had another one. Anyway, a bunch of them, and I could look up their names in just a second. But ultimately, she decided to go ahead and have some of her hymns published. And so in 1760, 2 volumes of her hymns and poems were published called Poems on Subjects Chiefly Devotional by Theodosia. So the concession that she made was, okay, I'll get my hymns published, but you can't put my name on it. So she had to so they used her pen name, which is Theodosia. So if you look in the back of some hymnals, if you look for an author, you might find the author Theodosia, and that would be her. She was also part of like a literary circle in Broughton and the surrounding areas. So they would get together and just talk about essays and write, share poems and essays and all these things. And it wasn't necessarily sacred. There was sacred and there was also secular. And all of the friends in her literary circle had pen names also. So her brother was part of that also. And I think her father was too. And then quite a few other people that she was connected with. Amazon can be wonderful. I just got, a couple weeks ago in preparation for this, I was looking on Amazon to see if there were any more books about Anne Steele or Theodosia that I didn't have. And I found that there's this man that prints like or copies the original publications and then puts them in print. So this is her Poems on Subjects Chiefly Devotional, the 2 volumes, and it has the 3rd volume in it too. So anyway, it's just like the original print of her hymns and poems, which, so feel free to take a look at that after. It was like $15 or $20. I was like, oh, yes, please, I'll take that. So in the first 2 volumes, there were 144 hymns, 34 psalms, and about 30 short poems in addition to that. So, any questions about Anne at this point? I'm going to kind of shift a little bit to, okay. All right, so how I met Anne. I was looking online. Now, this was probably 17 or 18 years ago. And I was looking online for this song that I had known for several years called Thy Mercy, My God. And it's just a really nice hymn, but it was set to newer music, and so it wasn't easy to find sheet music for it. And I stumbled upon this website, the only place online I could find it at that time. It wasn't as, plentiful as now. But I found it on this website called Indelible Grace, and there's a university Christian fellowship group called Reformed University Fellowship. It's through the Presbyterian Church, and they have this free online hymnal that they created. And what people do that are part of this Reformed University Fellowship is they take really old hymns that maybe have been forgotten or neglected, or maybe just have really bad, I'll come back to that, tunes associated with them, and then write new tunes. And so on the website, they have free sheet music, demos of what the song sounds like in those days, overhead transparency sheets you could print off so that you could copy it onto overhead paper. So anyway, I was like pouring through this website, just looking at all these hymns that had new music set to them, and I came across an Anne Steele hymn. And it's called Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul. And I thought that was interesting, and then I read a little bit about Anne Steele in the biography, and it had all the wrong information about how she was thrown from a horse and how her James Elcombe died the day before their wedding. And I was like, what a tragic life. And her life was tragic, but maybe not quite like that. So anyway, and I looked at that song and listened to it, and I was just so moved. And we've sung it at our church many times over the years, and then it just kind of started, not an obsession, but just a love for her and her hymnody. So I'm going to just show you a little bit. I gotta turn my speaker on. I'm going to play some little clips of some music. So this that I'm going to play for you to start is the recording from Indelible Grace. I'm just going to play the first verse, but this is Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul. So that was the recording or the song that I found, and then the words just go on, and they're beautiful and sad and redemptive and wrong device. I'm over here. So here's the whole thing. If you wanted to take a look at all the words afterwards, I can show you. At some point after we discovered Anne Steele, my husband bought me this biography, which is kind of the authoritative biography on Anne Steele's life. It was like my treasured Christmas gift that year. And I'll leave this up here also if you want to take a look at it afterwards. But it has all the details of her life, all those writings that were associated with her mother-in-law's diaries. And then in the back, it has all of her psalms and hymns. And so we've just, over the years have used this as a resource for our church and just for ourselves. And I'll come to that in a second. So my husband, okay, sorry, I'm just making sure I don't miss. I have some notes here I want to make sure I don't miss. Okay, so after we kind of really discovered her and started digging deeper into Anne, my husband would, we as like worship leaders like to try to kind of center the whole worship service around whatever the sermon is for that day. So, and to try to really connect things. And so sometimes, and actually since we discovered Anne Steele, I've written a lot of tunes for old hymns that I have reworked and set to entirely new music, and we sing those at our church regularly. And so part of the process for me is I think it's really important to have singable tunes, and a lot of the older tunes that are associated with some hymns aren't very singable, especially in a culture where people don't read music anymore. And so when you have hymns that have really big jumps in the between notes, those are really hard for people to sing. If they're too high, if they're too low, we have like a smaller range of singing than what there may have been at some point. And people don't know how to like sing well anymore, and I don't mean that, you know, disrespectfully, but like, but we don't as a culture, and we don't read music and as a culture. And so I think it's really important when we're considering having people sing together that we make it singable. And so that's something that I've really tried to do in creating hymn tunes over the years. Now I'm going to share with you today 7 hymn tunes that I've written for Anne Steele hymns. That is what I have written for her hymns, but I've written a multitude of other tunes for other hymn writers that we've used in our church services over the years. So I'm not going to share all of those with you today. We're going to stick to Anne Steele. But if you're interested, I'd be happy to show you some of those as well. So any questions before I move on? Okay. So the first hymn tune, and I'll put the words up in a second. Oh, and I'll tell you, so I have recordings. My good friend Bob Berger, who lives in Franklin, some of you might know him. He's a guitarist. He helps me lead worship most Sundays at our church. And I nabbed him the other night and had him help me make some pretty not great recordings, but so that you can at least hear what the songs sound like. So this is a hymn by Anne Steele called When I Survey Life's Varied Scene. And this is the one that is attributed to her writing after James Elcombe was drowned in the river. It is beautiful words. I do want to read a little bit of this one to you just because so it's, when I survey life's varied scene amid the darkest hours, sweet rays of comfort shine between and thorns are mixed with flowers. Lord, teach me to adore thy hand from whence my comforts flow, and let me in this desert land a glimpse of Canaan know. And then she says, is health and ease my happy share? Oh, may I bless my God. Thy kindness let my songs declare and spread thy praise abroad. While such delightful gifts as these are kindly dealt to me, may all my hours of health and ease be devoted, Lord, to thee. So, and she kind of continues like that. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but again, all of this is up here. You're welcome to look at it afterwards. So here is the tune that I wrote for When I Survey Life's Varied Scene. And this one, this was the first one. I've kind of put these, I think, in chronological order of when I wrote them. But I'm not sure. But who knows? You don't know. I don't know. It's close. So that's the first one. Oh, not yet, not yet. Okay, all right. And then the next one is called Was It for Sin, for Mortal Guilt? And so she focused a lot on like the sacrifice of the cross, and which I think probably made sense for her, being a person who had experienced so much suffering. And so this was another one. And when I'm composing a tune for a hymn, I just spend some time reflecting on the words before I start trying to work out a melody, because it needs to fit, right? You don't want to sing something super happy with something that is, you know, words that are tragic or, you know, that bring sadness. So. And this one, Where Shall I Fly? Pay attention to the words at the beginning of this, because this like first phrase is going to pop up again in one of her hymns later on. As I said, you know, and any poets, right, they're going to reuse some of the same terminology, and they kind of have same phrases. I find that as a composer, when I'm composing a melody, that I keep coming back to the same musical thoughts, right? And I get in a rut. So anyway, you'll see that come up again later. This song is kind of a fun little personal story with this one. That so my husband Jason did his doctorate in rural ministry quite a number of years ago, and he actually has become like, he wouldn't say this, but I will, kind of one of the nation's authorities on the topic of rural ministry. And so he actually speaks a lot at conferences and teaches doctoral and master students about what it's like to do rural ministry. So there's this organization that he partners with. Actually, this particular organization is who introduced us. So that's a little side note. It's kind of another story for another time. But anyway, he was speaking at a conference, and I got to go with him. And since I was going with him, and he had told his friend who led the services at this conference that I write these tunes for Anne Steele hymns, and she was from a rural area. So we did a little presentation there about Anne Steele, and then all these people there, I think there were like 500 people, all sang this hymn together. So it was really a special moment for me, and as I was going back through these, preparing these, I'm like, some of these we haven't sung for a while. I missed them. So here's Where Shall I Fly? And the next one, I totally forgot that I ever wrote a hymn tune for this one, and I was getting things ready for today, and I have like this, I print all this music in an online music composition tool called Noteflight, and so it's easy for me to just kind of type in the music that I want and add the lyrics, and so I was looking through that, and I found all the ones that I remembered, and then I have this little book that, this little manuscript book that I've had for years and years, and it's all, well, I guess it's all filled up, but I do have some empty back pages, so maybe I should use those, I don't know. But before I had easy access to Noteflight or like composing music online, and sometimes there's just something really great about using a pencil, right? I love pencils. I love mechanical pencils. My students will tell you I oftentimes have a ponytail, and I just keep one in my ponytail, so I always have it there to mark music or whatever. But anyway, I would write hymn tunes in here. So if you want to flip through this, you can. You can see some of the other hymns for other poets that I've written tunes for. But I was flipping through here, and I found this one, and I was like, oh my goodness, I totally forgot about it. So I notated it the other night and had my friend Bob help me. And actually, is this the right one? Yeah. At first I said, Bob, I think I'm just going to do this one on piano and sing it. And then he started doing this thing with his guitar, and I was like, Bob, it was so good. So we kept it. Here it is. He's a really good guitarist. Does anyone know Bob Berger? Yeah, he's incredible. Right? I mean, Bob, he's so good. Anyway, so you can see here where she used those same words again, right? Where shall we fly but to thy feet? Thy refuge is our seat. And so anyway, and then also this particular song was written, I believe, at the end of during a war, and so it was like a cry to the nation, like to the whole United Kingdom, like, listen, here it is. And so she did often write about things that were happening with government or in the country, or like when Isaac Watts died, she wrote 2 hymns in his honor and in his memory. When her younger half-sister got married, she wrote some hymns or a few poems to honor her marriage, and which I think is just lovely and also like so relevant, right, to the culture and what she was facing day to day. And this was the other one I totally forgot about, and it was in my little manuscript book, and I was like, oh, it's kind of fun. And also shout out to my friend Bob for helping me figure out a couple chords in that, since I forgot it, that I had it. There were a couple things I was like, oh, I don't like it. And Bob was like, oh, try this. And it worked. He's so good, I tell you. Lucky to have good friends like that. This song, Ye Wretched, Hungry, Starving, Poor. Has anyone ever heard this hymn before? This is one of her ones that may be a little more familiar to some people than probably any of her others. It's a little more well-known, but still not really well-known. So I've actually written 2 tunes to this one, and this one is a congregational one, and I was, as I said before, about like getting in a rut as a composer or a poet. I was doing some professional development as a music teacher a few years ago and learning how to use, well, it was the composition one. And so there were these two guys that were teaching the class, and we all had to do a composition project. And I said, can I do something personal instead of for school? And they were like, yeah, like you're gonna become a better composer no matter what. So I worked out this tune for like a solo voice for this. I am not gonna show you that one today, but if you would like to see it, you can let me know and I can show it to you. But this is the congregational version, and it's upbeat and it's like joyful, because it's like about, this song is about like all the wretched, hungry, starving, poor. So like basically all of us, like there's room in God's kingdom for everyone. So it's like a song of welcome. And then lastly, this song is called Praise Ye the Lord, Your Praise Employ. And so in addition to speaking on rural ministry, my husband also oversees this program. He's like a co-leader for a program at a seminary north of Boston, and so it's like a program for early career pastors. So to get them thinking about like how should the church interact with the community on different levels, like business, art, medicine, education, like take any aspect of the community or the larger parish, and like how should the church or how should faith be interacting with that. So anyway, so he's been overseeing this program for a few years, and it's a grant-funded program through the Lilly Foundation out in Indianapolis, and they also gave their group in Boston 2 grants to write books. So they wrote collaborative books. So the first one that they wrote, which was actually published second, was called Return to the Parish, and it's different pastors each wrote a chapter on those different aspects of how the church interacts with those aspects of society. And the second one was published first, and it's called Beholding Beauty, and it's like, I forgot what the subtitle is. Anyway, it's discovering God through the arts, and so they talk about all different art forms, music and dance and theater and like pop music and perfume and fashion and all these kind of things. And so they had, I think, 13 different pastors each write a chapter for it. And then this actually, there's a pastor in Georgia, Vermont here, who was part of that, and he wrote a song. He did a chapter on songwriting, and he wrote a song for it. It's beautiful, wonderful. And then in one of Jason's chapters, he included this Anne Steele hymn. And so I wrote this tune for a celebration that we had with all of the pastors who created that. It's actually a really lovely night. We had culinary arts as one of the chapters, and my husband is a really good cook, so he made this amazing meal for everyone down in Boston. And then we had like a little service afterwards, and everybody kind of shared poetry. And our friend Tyler from Georgia wrote this, sang the song he wrote, and we sang this. So, wrong device. And that's all of them. So that's my whole presentation, but do you have any questions about Anne Steele or about my composition, anything? Yeah.
Is there any, I'm not quite sure how to express it, so when you use her work, do you have permission?
Yeah, I think everything is in the public domain, so yeah, that's a good question.
So in a Baptist church, would you go in and find a number for hymns?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have seen her hymns in a few hymnals, and I didn't look that up ahead of time, but yeah.
Well, I'm a lifelong Methodist. Grew up in the church here at St. Albans, and I have a 1930s book that was my father's. There was one hymn, but I've never heard it. And again, in the next one, I have a collection of the hymnals myself.
Yeah.
And the red one that we had in the 1960s had that hymn, but it didn't make the cut for the last time.
Oh,
I should
yeah.
have taken this, like a photo of the page. So
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it's possible. Her hymn, there was a publication of her hymns released in the U.S. in like I think the late 1800s. So if it was something published in the early 1900s, I would say most definitely some of her hymns would have been in there. Yeah. And if you just look at that, there's always in the back of hymnals, there's like a ton of indexes. And if you don't know what you're looking for, right, you wouldn't know what to look at. But there's always an index of composers and authors. Yeah, so if you look at those, you would see probably Theodosia. Yeah. Yeah, I think it would. Any other questions? Yeah, Dan?
Just an observation. It's a wonderful presentation for you to have done this just before Easter.
Oh, yes, thank you.
It is very appropriate.
Oh,
And
good.
it's wonderful what you've been able to do, putting music to those words.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been such a joy, and kind of a little pocket of creativity, and also like every time I introduce a song at church, like to have people sing along is just a really special thing. And sometimes they flop, and I'm like, okay, we're not going to do that one again. But yeah, it's okay. Good. Yeah.
Where did you and your husband meet?
Oh, yeah. So we actually both met at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.
You make a great pair.
Oh, thank you. I'll remind him of that. And well, I mentioned about the rural organization that we met through. So every fall, there's like this little conference that our college would put on. And the college that we went to was for people heading into ministry. And so they would have like this little missions conference every fall, and they would focus a lot on overseas missionaries or work in the city, because we were right in Chicago, downtown. But I was feeling like I was maybe headed toward rural ministry, and he was already called to rural ministry. So we actually did meet in this organization's workshop. There were 3 students there: Jason, me, and some other girl. And anyway, after that, he just couldn't, stop thinking about me. So that's the joke anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, John.
Your father, you said, was Dr. Max Baird?
Yes. Yeah.
Who was a good duplicate, pretty darn good duplicate bridge player.
Oh, yes. Did you play bridge with him? No. No, my dad's tried to teach me bridge a couple of times, and it doesn't make sense to me, but maybe if I put a little more into it. He does mention, did you played with him?
Absolutely,
That's
yes.
great.
For several, during the time he was here,
Yeah.
3-4 years he was.
Yeah, he was here for like almost 11 years, but I think did the bridge, I can't remember.
He was playing bridge all that length of time.
No, I don't think he was either. Yeah, after my grandmother passed, because she was his partner for a while, and after she passed, I think he kind of let it go a little bit.
Are you putting together a hymnal for yourself?
That is a great question. Someday, yeah, I would love to. Jason and I kind of have this dream of maybe someday writing a book where he can do like some biographical or like sermonic material about Anne Steele's life, and then incorporate the hymn tunes that I've written. But I'm definitely going to need more than 7. So yeah, it's a project maybe for once the kids are gone. Our youngest is 11, so it's in sight. We'll see. Yeah, but yeah, we would love to do that. Anything else?
Final questions for Jennifer?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, and feel free. I'll be here for a few minutes, so you can. I printed out the hymn tunes if you want to take a look at any of them, and the books I told you about, and my manuscripts up here. So, thank you so much.
Remember, say Albans to your dad.
I'll tell him.